Hello, hey, this is Ian Carlin from the Empty Cup podcast, and I am here in the studio with Shad Scott, my co host. And this is where traditional and modern martial arts collide. And we talk about the issues, we talk about just awesome stuff here. And today is no exception. We have a guest that I am so excited about. His name is Steve Smith, and he was a student of Fook Young, who was a Red Boat Wing Chun practitioner. And this is just some awesome stuff. But I'm going to be handing it over to Shad to kind of introduce our guest maybe a little bit more and start the ball rolling on some of the questions. So, Shad, go ahead and take it away, my friend.
So we had this idea to have a guest who could tell us about every era of Bruce Lee's development, or somebody who's had experience in a particular area. And I was saying to Ian, there isn't anybody better than Steve Smith when it comes to that Seattle era, because he's touched hands with, he's interacted with more people in that era, the Seattle era, than anyone probably in the world. He's like the guy for that. So if you were going to write a book on that era, you would want to talk to Steve Smith.
Right.
He is the guy. I know Steve has had training with Jesse Glover, Bruce Lee's first student. He's trained with Ed Hart. He's trained with Fook Young. He's trained with, it's Sid Wilcock. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah, Woodcock.
Woodcock. And I know you also know a lot of the other students as well, like Garcia and James DeMaio. And so I was wondering if we could start off with you telling us a little bit about how you met Fook and a little about who he was, who Fook Young was.
Yeah, I met Fook Young about a year into my training with David Harris, or maybe more than that, but I guess it was about 3 years into my training with David Harris. And Fook Young was a Chinese opera player that had moved to the United States, during the political stuff that was happening in China, Hong Kong, and so on. And anyway, Dave asked me if I wanted to meet him, and I said, of course I do. So that was arranged through our mutual friend, Andy Dale, who's an internal artist up in the Seattle area that was also a longtime student of Fook Young. Anyway, I met him in that way. He taught out of his garage. By that time, he was about 75 years old. I had visions of being able to train in Wing Chun and Manus were my two goals, right? And he had closed his hands to Gung Fu by this time. And so I knew, though, that I could trick him. And so I went and met him. He opened up his garage door and bent over straight over backwards. And I knew I was going to be in for it, right? Because I couldn't even barely get down on all fours.
So he limboed in?
Yeah, he limboed in, that's right. And anyway, pretty funny. Anyway, he sits down, he reaches across, he holds my hand, he looks up at me and he says, "I'm not going to teach you Wing Chun."
Oh.
I was like, ah! So anyway, yeah, that was my meeting with him. He was an opera brother of Bruce Lee's father, and so as a favor, I guess Bruce moved over to Seattle. Fook Young drove his Hudson down to Oakland and picked him up. But to be honest with you, that wasn't what attracted me to Fook. I was sort of like everyone, I saw Enter the Dragon in the movie theater, actually on the same night that I watched a movie called The Big Brawl with Jackie Chan. And if I can not offend anybody, I was actually more impressed with Jackie's movement than I was with Bruce's, you know, even though Bruce's was so incredibly powerful and incredibly fast. I like Jackie's range a lot. And so anyway, I never did set out to, you know, follow in Bruce's footsteps or anything. And it was just a weird luck of the dice, I guess, that as I followed my path, that led to some of the guys that I ended up meeting and looking up to as like father figures in my life. So
let me jump in here and ask you a question. You said you were studying with somebody prior to Fook. Who was it? Who was that you were studying, and what were you studying?
They called it Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. It was sort of the open name. It was Shoshin-Ryu Karate, Aiki Jiu-Jitsu / Young Chun, and but this was like at a neighborhood center in a basement with naked lights, as they say, and it was very impossible to get introduction there. I didn't know it existed. I went to a seminar by the great Danny and Asano, and while I was there, there was a guy with us, looked like an engineer with a pocket protector and a dress shirt, and nobody paired up with him. And I didn't have a partner. I said, would you mind being my partner for the day? And he said, I would love to, thank you. And I went at this guy, and the next thing I knew, I was on the ground. And I went at the guy again, and the next thing I know, I'm on the ground. And I told him, I said, I've looked my whole life for this exact thing. And I trained with him all that day. I trained him all the next day. And I begged him to let me come to his school. And he said, I'm sorry, we don't accept students. And I think he went and made a phone call or something, because he came back and said, okay, you can come, but if you screw it up, you can't come back.
Ooh.
So I said, I can't make it that first night because I have to go say goodbye to my other teachers. I was training with a few other people. I was training Hapkido and Aiki Jiu-Jitsu and a few different things in Seattle. I was a fisherman in Alaska, so when I was down here in the States, what I did for my full-time thing was I took classes. And so I was taking 40 hours plus a week in classes. And anyway, so I went and met Sid and Dave at the same time there at the Finney Center in Seattle. That was quite a memorable event. And when I got there, I realized that I had fallen into what I wanted to dedicate the rest of my life to learning. And you know, it was effortless, it was powerful, it was magical, it was incredible. So anyway, David Harris was his name. He was he's passed away now. He had started out back in the 50s as a karate man. In fact, his teacher was the teacher that Bruce Lee beat the crap out of in the handball court that Ed Hart and Jesse.
Really?
Yeah.
The Japanese karate teacher who was challenging him in Jesse's book, the Between Jeet Kune Do and Wing Chun.
Yeah, and of course, like in everything, there's two sides to every story. But yeah, that was him, and he was a bit of a jerk, I think. And you know, he basically had these flying squads, which would go around, and back then they would go around and trot into somebody's school and say, I don't think your stuff is that much, and the other guy would say, oh, well, actually it is. And they would fight, and whoever won, you know, the students would trot over to it was sort of like old school marketing. Yeah. And so that's when Harris left him, and he got more and more interested in Chinese martial arts. So he was studying under, let's see, T.Y. Pang, Chung Ta Chen, Raymond Chung, and all these different Taiji, Bagua, Xing Yi guys. And Fook who was at that time was Bruce's teacher there in Seattle. And actually, in our tradition, we'd always learned that or heard that Harris was the first non-Chinese to train with Fook, but that was not true. Bruce had introduced Jesse and those guys, Garcia, Ed Hart, and all those guys met Fook Young in 1959, about 3 or 4 years before Dave did, which was kind of interesting.
Mm. I'm curious, did Jesse ever and Fook ever, interact, discuss martial arts? Did Jesse, was he influenced at all by Fook at all or anything like that?
Yeah, they, Fook, there's an interesting story. I should probably send it to you guys that you could maybe play or something, watch at least, where Leroy Garcia talks about that. That Fook would come down to their apparently they trained like in a garage or something. Mm-hmm. And Fook was there, and just in a 30-second synopsis of a 15-minute story, Garcia was a big, tough man. I mean, he was a very powerful fighter and had a lot of fights. Jesse was, held Garcia in somewhat of awe as far as a fighter. And Fook was there, and he said, you're a big, strong man. He says, attack me. And so Garcia says, yeah, okay, and kind of throws this non-committal punch at him. And Fook said something angrily to Bruce in Cantonese and said, this guy is basically patronizing me, and, have him come at me. And so Garcia says, okay, I'm going to open it up on you, and went at him for real. And Fook hit him with a Phoenix Eye fist up under the arm and made Garcia's arm go numb, and he couldn't move it for about 20 minutes. And he said, I felt well and truly schooled. And Fook was laughing and says, oh, you're a big, strong man, But Fook had a tremendous amount of background in training Red Boat Wing Chun, Bak Mai, Xing Yi Chuan, Bagua Chong, Shuai Jiao, Chinese fast wrestling. Just a tremendous background that Bruce plugged into. In the interview that I had arranged for Fook to meet with Jesse for his book, Bruce's dad had asked him to take care of Bruce when Bruce was moving to the States. So he said, yeah, drove down, picked him up in his Hudson, and he got out. Bruce was getting off the boat, big ship, came up to Fook and said, Chisao. And Fook says, okay. And so they started doing Chisao, and Bruce couldn't do anything, right? And so he says, I want you to teach me. So he basically taught him from 59 until about 66, on and off as he was in town. Anyway,
so let me,
he said that, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was gonna ask you a question because you had mentioned all the different arts that Fook was had mastered or was familiar with. So when you went to class, did what was it? Was it like one class was Wing Chun, one class was Mantis, or did he kind of have an integrated system already, like a Fook Young system that he kind of passed on? Or was it just kind of, oh, I'm interested in passing this on to, doing this today and next week that? How did the class run, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, that's a really perceptive question, Ian. He taught me, he taught everybody maybe differently, but I was training with him privately. The way he taught me was through what he called the Tianshan Mountain Gung, and which is sort of like a old school Taiji Chuan type of thing. And it has very, very involved body mechanics, and you can kind of put various stuff on that core. And so, you know, as we would be moving, he might be showing, you know, these kinds of hand positions while we were doing the basic Chun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He also was a big believer in what he called transmitting stuff. And so I would be sitting in meditative posture and he'd put his hand out on my forehead and pass systems to me. I was pretty dubious about this, but it's been unreal through the last 20 years as some of this stuff surfaces, and I can feel it coming out and answer people's questions. And so I'm a little bit less dubious about it than I was while it was happening.
Okay. All right.
But
very interesting. Very interesting. So, you know, you said something there.
I might need to talk. I'm sorry. There was a delay and I walked on you. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that when he told you that he wasn't going to teach you Wing Chun, your heart probably sank a little bit. And you said that you tricked him. So
just a little.
He attempted to trick him. He tried to trick him.
Oh, you tried to
trick
him. So how did you end up getting him to open up to you?
I think it was just in the very simple fact that I quit trying to get him to open up to me, and I just opened up to him. And the process of opening up to him, I think, made him, or, you know, encouraged him to begin to trust me.
I'm curious.
You know, so yeah, his stuff. Back the little man, he was 98 pounds, 5 foot tall, and his bicep, around his bicep when I met him, was the same size as my wrist. I could put my fingers around his bicep. And so I expected it. Harris was so smooth and so soft, you couldn't feel him closing on you. It just felt like a wisp of breath across your arms, and you were on the ground or you were hurt. So I expected Fook would be like that and more, especially since he was a Qigong master. But the fact of it is that Fook would be touching you and he could leave bruises on you without even hitting, just by the way he pressed into you. It was incredible. That happened even when he was 98 years old. The last time I saw him, 3 months before he passed away, I was sticking with him, and he basically was using one technique, and I had a bruise on my wrist for more than 2 months. And just very, very, very powerful man, which was pretty funny. You know, Bruce was famous for his inch punch. Well, Fook could hit you with his wrist or his palm or his side of his arm and send you across the room. He could literally hit you with any part of his body. And so that idea of short power, this idea of short power being developed by Bruce Lee, frankly, is a crock of shit. You know, this is something that was it's integral, right? It's integral to all of these arts and has been for centuries.
Right. It's in Xingyi, it's in other Kung Fu systems. It's not exclusive to any art. It's just an understanding of biomechanics.
There we go.
Now, I have a question for you. In your interview with Adam, you talked about how you were training with Fook for a number of years. And when you met Jesse, you weren't interested in training with him initially. But something had to happen to interest you that changed your point of view. And I'm curious what that was. Can you tell us a little bit about that interaction?
Yeah. Leaving the story part of it out, I guess. I was running a video company. Jesse was interested in me selling his stuff. I met him at Ed Hart's. That's quite a fun story. But when I met him, he came.
Go ahead and tell it. I mean, you know, we're here to hear you. So, I mean, if you feel like you want to tell that story, please, by all means, share with us.
Okay. I'd want to be sensitive about your time and that. But yeah, I went down to Kelly Warden's school and picked up some videos that we were selling for him. he said, have you met Jesse Glover? I said, I don't know who Jesse Glover is. And he said he was Bruce Lee's first student. I said, well, is his stuff any good? And he says, yeah, it's, you know, he's an incredibly good fighter. His videotapes are sort of, but very full of good information. And I think you would enjoy meeting him as a person anyway. And so he called Jesse, and Jesse's like, yeah, okay, I'll meet him, but have him meet me at Ed Hart's house on 145th Street, about 45 minutes away. And I said, okay, I'm leaving now. When would he like me to meet him? He said, just come straight away. So I drove up, knocked on the door, and I saw a movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked, and here's Ed Hart. You know, he's looking through the curtain at me. And on his kitchen window, right, he pulls the curtain back, and he's like looking outside to see who was bothering him. Ed, I didn't know at the time, but Ed would stay up most of the night, and he slept a lot of the day. So this was like an incursion into his sleeping time. So I wish somebody would have pointed this out, because he opens up the door and he's standing there in a pair of shorts. I'm not talking about running shorts. I'm talking about he's standing there in his shorts and tall tube socks up to his knees, right? The red three striped socks. And I'm like, holy crap. He says, all right, come on in here. He says, come in here. He says, yeah, Jesse said that you'd be meeting here. I'm Ed. And I came in, there's like no lights on in the place, and there's just this haze of smoke, and Ed's drinking his coffee and having a cigarette, trying to wake up. And anyway, I'm peering through the haze, and I see back in the distance this shape, looks like he's wearing a toque and sitting there glowering at me. And I walk in, and Ed closes the door, and it goes into almost complete darkness. Turns on a light, and he starts telling me, you know, I'm being interviewed by him. You know, what's your background? Who's your teacher? Why do you want to get our stuff? You know, what can we do for you? What can you do for us? Type of a thing. And then he starts talking about his time with Bruce Lee, and how Ed had 500 street fights, and he hadn't really lost, right? He'd go to the toughest place he could find and say, you know, your mother, blah, 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 blah. And it was on, and he could hit you from 6 inches away and knock you out. That guy had the most efficient jabs, crosses, hooks, shovel punches and stuff I had seen up until that time. Just incredible puncher. Very accurate. And anyway, so when Bruce introduced him to, or excuse me, Jesse introduced him to Bruce, Bruce said, hit me. And Ed goes, I don't think you want me to do that. You know, he had some experience hitting people, and, you know, some people he hit didn't, you know, it was not a good outcome. And anyway, so he closes at Bruce, and Bruce shuts him down and hits him in the throat or in the eye. And Bruce, or excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm getting old. Ed said, you know, okay, well, I want to do that again. I wasn't ready, and clearly you can defend yourself, so I'd like another shot at this, right? And so he goes again, and Bruce shut him down. He goes, beware of the peacock eye. And or the eye of the peacock, maybe was what he said. Anyway, we all had an uproarious laugh, and then we sat down and started talking to Jesse. Jesse said, do you stick hands? And I said, I don't know what that is. I'm trying to like dissolve this, right? I'm frankly a little bit nervous, and so Jesse goes, you know, where you go like this, and I said, oh yeah, we do that. And he says, okay, we'll come up here. So I went to rotate with him, and I am trying not to trigger him. So I'm not moving. He says, what would you do from here? I said, there is nothing I would do from here. He goes, why? I said, if I do anything from here, I'm dead. And he goes, okay, I'll teach you. And I said, well, I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing, but I would like to be your friend. And so basically from that day forward, for the rest of the time I lived in Seattle, which was many years, I met him 3 or 4 times a week. And we would spend from noon often until 1 or 2 in the morning, going to Denny's and talking, and then going out in the parking lot and practicing, and then go to our various classes and come back and meet again for a for more training. I don't know if that
Ian,
answers.
are you still there? Ian.
It said Ronan left the conversation.
Oh yeah, I think we lost him. Hold on a sec.
He said, sorry about that. Here's a new link.
Okay. Wonder why he can't just rejoin the link that he created. Okay, Steve, I'm going to click on it.
Did that work?
It worked for me. I haven't had anything like this happen before. Sorry about that, Steve.
It's okay. Should I click on that link from my computer?
The new link? Did you click on the new link
Yeah.
yet?
I did, yeah.
I did too, so. Okay, he sent us another one. Let's see if he's, try this again.